Hello, it's Mark here from Yokel Bear Reads, and I want to start off by saying thank you. I've got some new subscribers, so hello. Thank you for subscribing. It's really appreciated. Never really know who I'm kind of throwing these videos out to in the world, so it's always nice when somebody subscribes, so thank you. What I was going to do today was, even though it's a little late because it's it's almost the end of January, I've set myself a couple of reading goals for this year. Something struck me, and that is that there is a particular author that has been with me for most of my life, most of my adult life. I read the first book that he produced when I was about 19 years old, and I've just finished reading his latest one. And it's an author that people might not have heard of. Some of you might have, but I've got a feeling a lot of you won't. And that author is Patrick Gale, who's a British writer who has written, I think it's 17 novels and 2 collections of short stories. And he's probably best known for this book, which was a huge bestseller in Britain, Notes from an Exhibition, which is it's kind of about mental health, it's about families, it's about the past, and how things that happen in the past can reverberate through families. And the thing that I love about Patrick Gale is that he has an absolute eye for how people work, how families work, the nuances within relationships, and just how families interact with each other and how they can be functional and how sometimes they can be really dysfunctional. But like I said, I kind of came across Patrick Gale when I was about 19 with this book here. Now, this isn't the original one. This is a reissue because I'd lent out my original copy of this many years ago and never got it back. His first novel was called The Aerodynamics of Pork. And Patrick Gale is an LGBT writer, but I don't think that's kind of how he would necessarily define himself, I guess, from the interviews that I've seen. His books have LGBT characters in them, and certainly this one was certainly marketed as a book for the LGBT market. But some of his books aren't really, it's almost like it's incidental, and in some of the books the main characters aren't LGBT. But saying that, Patrick Gale was also the author, or the writer I should say, of something that was on TV last year in Britain, which was probably one of the best 2-part dramas I've ever seen, called Man in the Orange Shirt, which was an examination of kind of the gay male experience in Britain. The first episode was set in the just after the Second World War, and then comparing it to up to date now. And it was a phenomenal piece of drama. The writing was just absolutely exquisite. So this is my reading goal basically, which is that I've read everything that Patrick Gale has ever written and published. I've read, but I've decided to read them again. I'm just going to reread the whole lot. And these are the ones I've got on my shelf at the moment. So quite a few. But obviously I've got more to get because I've read them. Some of them I read as library books, and some of them I read and then I lent out. And I don't know, sometimes my friends aren't very good at giving books back. Maybe I need a library system. Anyway, but the reason I want to do this is because I've been looking at the novels that he's written, and I've been looking at my life, and I found that when there are certain things going on in my life, sometimes good things, sometimes bad things, when there have been memorable events happening to me, it seems to coincide with a Patrick Gale novel. So very often, the novels that I'm reading by Patrick Gale have fitted kind of what my life was like at the time and things that were going on, which is, I don't know, maybe that's a bit weird. But I thought what I wanted to do was more than just review the books. I'm actually going to tell the story of my life a little bit through rereading these books. So it'll be part book review, but also kind of placing these books in my life at the time that I read them, which I think could be quite an interesting thing. It might be a little bit, confessional at times. Might be a little scurrilous because, I have been up to some things in my life. Anyway, we'll get onto that later. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm rereading Patrick Gale for 2019. I've almost finished this one, the reread, and actually, do you know what? I just love this book so much. It was so much part of my coming out as gay, and this book has always kind of been around in my life. But rereading it again, this time, interestingly, I got a very different perspective on it, and possibly a better perspective. And so I'll be reading this now, and right through to his very latest one. Sorry, it's a big pile of books here, which is Take Nothing With You, which I think is one of his best novels. And again, it's one of those ones that's set in two time periods. And it's about somebody who's got a 24-hour period where they have to be on their own completely with nothing really to do. And it's somebody looking back on their life and thinking about how music had played a huge part in their lives. So that's my plan. I'm rereading Patrick Gale and also maybe giving a bit of personal history as well. Which leads on to my second reading goal of this year, which is probably a bit more serious, a bit more non-fiction, certainly, which is, you may have heard, certainly if you live in Britain you have, can't avoid it, but if you live elsewhere in the world, you might have heard that we've got this Brexit thing going on. Don't get me started on it. But it got me thinking, which is that a lot of what I've been thinking about Brexit and where do I stand with it and, how have we got to this point, has made me think about, well, where has this come from? And I think sometimes you've got to look back in history and think, well, where are the roots of these events? Where we are now, where has that come from? So here's my second reading goal for this year, which is these books here. They're weighty tomes. And I'll just show you. There's a British historian called David Kynaston. And he has written 3 books so far. And what his aim is to write an in-depth social history of Britain going from the end of the Second World War. So this one, Austerity Britain, goes from 1945 to 1951. And I read, I've already cracked into this one. There's quite a lot of parallels to what's going on now. You can see some of the things about kind of the end of the British Empire and how that's reverberating now. We'll say, don't necessarily think the British Empire was a great thing. But you can see how it's kind of playing out now with current events. And a lot of these things go back a long way. And he's not finished it yet, because what he's going to do is tell the story of Britain, the history of Britain, told through the words and of ordinary people in a lot of cases. And not just kind of looking at prime ministers and, the Queen and stuff like that, but looking at the lives of ordinary people and how did that change over time. The second one goes from the period 1951 to 1957, Family Britain, which is roughly kind of when my mother was born. So it's really interesting talking to her about what it was like in the 1950s. Well, that's when she was growing up, I should say. And the latest one is called Modernity Britain, which takes the story up to 1962. So you can see we've got quite a long way to go. He's still got to publish some more, but I think these will keep me going. I've got a real interest in history, and I really want to try and understand the Britain that I'm living in at the moment. And I think sometimes reading some history is a good way of doing that. I think if you know where you've come from, you might be able to predict where things might be going. But of course, it wouldn't be a Yoko Bear Reads video without a ghost story. So I will be carrying on with the ghost story videos, and the next one I'm going to do will be from this beautiful collection called Ghostly Tales, spine-chilling stories from the Victorian era. And I'm going to review a story by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle of Sherlock Holmes fame. But this is about an Arctic expedition on a ship, and it all goes a bit wrong. Anyway, so that's my reading goals. I'm going to read everything I can by Patrick Gale. Again, I'm going to reread those and tell you a little bit about me. I'm going to do a big historical research through here to try and understand where we are now. So those are my reading goals. I'm not really kind of putting a number on it. What I read on top of this, I don't know this year. I'm not going to set a... I will read 20, 30 more books on top of this. I think it will just be kind of... I would need to break this up a little bit sometimes, so I will pick up other stuff. And I am still buying books at quite a rate, as my bank manager keeps telling me. Anyway, so that's me done. That's kind of my reading goals for this year. If you like this, please press the likey thing down below. If you want to, if you want to subscribe, please do so, because I love it when people subscribe. And if you want to know when I post a video, which is, I'm hoping it's going to be about once a week, then press the little bell thing as well. But that's it. That's Patrick Gale, some British history, and of course the inevitable ghost story. I'll see you next time. Bye.